I'm Dave, the co-founder of Planet Wild. We've been around for 5, 6 years. Maintenance and rewilding is the new term that everybody knows about. I'm a landscape architect. I went to SUNY ESF, and my first job out of college was at a small engineering firm where I was an AutoCAD monkey, and I hated it. So I needed to be outside. I ended up getting a job at Central Park Conservancy, worked there for 10 years as construction director. And Central Park was my office. It was a really cool job. And then I left to join Planet Wild. And it's been very exciting ever since. So thanks for coming. And this is my cousin, confidant, and partner in all things, Alan.
Yeah, so resident arborist at Planet Wild, pretty exciting role to have. Yeah, I went to forestry school, studied soil sciences, forest ecology, and thought I'd follow in his footsteps and moved over to Central Park Conservancy. I think after he left, after you took off from Central Park, and was their lead arborist for a good 10 years, working on risk mitigation and plant health care and the whole soil interface with the plants that grow in Central Park. Now I'm here and we're doing it on a much different, more fun scale.
Before we start, hi Faith. Everyone's introduced themselves. Faith is.
Hi. I'm Faith Pastel Hughes. I'm a professor at Rochester Community College, and I'm interested in trying to do something like this on campus. So,
Nice to meet you.
I'm Faith and Planet Wild, and I've been partnering for 2 years, looking for the right way to rewild Westchester Community College's campus. That's ahead of us, but one of our best interns last summer was from WCC, and we still so we talk regularly about partnership. So I'm Graham Gunther, and I was the Chief of Forestry and Conservation in New York City for 20 years. And I'm the co-founder of the Natural Areas Conservancy, which is a nonprofit based in New York City, but progressively more national in its look the focus is the restoration and conservation of urban natural areas, the forests and wetlands, but started in New York City. I retired from the Parks Department at the end of 29, and I became a full suburbanite. Born and raised in New York City. From my big toe to my brain, it was the pandemic, and I'm a full-time suburbanite. And soon after that, I joined Planet Wild. And the subject of the presentation is transform your spaces with microforests. I'm going to get us back there. I'm giving a little bit of context first. So next slide, thank you. While they're doing that, we would much prefer if this is a conversation than 3 talking heads. It's a small room, so just interrupt us that way. So I'm personalizing this and dramatizing this a little bit, but for good reasons. So my career is in New York City, and I'm used to the New York City landscape, and I'm used to looking at it and figuring out where we should do green infrastructure, where we should be doing green spaces, where the inequities are. But now I find myself in this landscape. And through my ecological or conservation lens, I started to realize that there's all this turf-heavy space in suburbia, and it's space that could very easily be used for ecological restoration and ecosystem services. So, as they are currently landscape, residential, and commercial properties are frequently unable to provide essential ecosystem services and support biodiversity. It speaks for itself. Next slide. And this is from that spirit of the last slide, but of course from our own interests. My background is I was trained as a conservation ecologist, but it's so long ago that I essentially forget. But you take all 3 our expertise And you can see we're thinking about this new type of landscape. And what do you do with it? And so our mission is inspire, support homeowners, organizations, government, and businesses to rewild their land to support biodiversity and ecosystem services. In my mind, the word rewild is particular about a kind of small and intermediate sized space that you find in urban, suburban areas, you know, not so much obviously in Times Square or near Prospect Park, but there's a lot of suburban cities as I've gotten more used to. I'm here anywhere from from this city, White Plains to Bridgeport. So that's what we mean, or I mean by rewild. Our catchy phrases, 1 yard at a time, one community at a time, but it is sort of the way it feels like we need to move as the conservation moves through the metropolitan area. Next slide. It's hot, right? It's hot for several reasons. It follows in the footsteps of the way the environmental movement has been moving since the 60s. If you mark its dated, Rachel Carson, I don't know, everyone marks it differently, but it's more hot. You know, people are interested in clean water and in clean air in the way that they weren't thinking about in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Clean food, sustainability, climate change is people's mind. So we both felt as a team, but also knew because we're in the field that this sort of conservation, this sustainability movement was spreading. Next slide. So we, Planet Wild, I, as part of Planet Wild, see the metropolitan area as the third wave of conservation. First wave in American conservation was our great wild lands, as it should be. Second wave was in the cities. I was a direct beneficiary of it. I was in the city for 25 years doing it. But now it is moving into the larger metropolitan spaces. And when we use the statistic that Americans live in cities, they actually live in metropolitan areas. It's not the city boundaries altogether, even with New York City being so big. And it's sort of codified, this third wave. I'm just pulling out two things here, but it was codified in Biden's 30-30 mandate, which is to restore and preserve 30% of America's natural areas by 2030. It pulls out the need for suburban metropolitan space, and so does E.O. Wilson in his Half Earth. And that, all this stuff that I've been talking about, has been funneled through for us through this business model that we've developed at Planet Wild. It started with homes in people's backyards. It was personalized. It was people who've been thinking about native plants. Probably they came into this through native plants. It could be sustainability, but over time, small campuses, which could be 20 to 30 acres. So you're thinking about larger pieces of land. Still, of course, nothing compared to the Adirondacks or Yellowstone, or even private preserves that are being shepherded by land stewards over time. We started commercial spaces and warehouse spaces were included in this formula. And just three quick examples. We're working on one private land, Northwest Chester, about 3 acres. This client has a lot of money and sustainability from A to Z. It's an opportunity with a lot of resources to see what ecological restoration and sustainability looks like on a piece of private property like this. SUNY, we've been working with SUNY Purchase more recently. Think about a way to create a model of sustainable, in this case it's a public campus, which in my campuses, I mean there's private campuses too, but the public system not only has the capital money, but it's good to sort of have our public campuses underscored by sustainability. And then we'll see later this sort of pilot planting at Con Edison's campus, which is a few moments away. So what we're here to talk about is the microforests. And the microforest started in a conversation between Planet Wild and which is in Fairfield County, Connecticut. The Environmental Protection let out a climate smart forestry grant which is a new term being used nowadays, which in my interpretation means areas to do forestry in the environmental justice neighborhoods by and large, but in smaller, more dense places, but that also has its resonance through all the benefits that you gain through reforestation, with a focus on environmental justice neighborhoods. And eventually all that brainstorming for the proposal for the grant turned into what we have now, which is to using microforests, rewild, very turf-heavy campuses of about 8 schools in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is Connecticut's poorest city with the least amount of canopy cover. And so that's an example of how a business like ours can balance wealthy private clients that I just described while also working in environmental justice neighborhoods, which is important to us. What's coming up is we have a grant with both the Norwalk Land Trust and the City of New York, City of Norwalk, to take what's a rather rundown, sorry if I can say it, Pocket Park, and an environmental justice neighborhood in which there's a lacking spaces for just people to have hang out and talk. That's going to turn into a microforest. And we also have a proposal out to use microforests to restore the sides of the Hutchinson River Parkway. State DOT got some of the IRA climate money, so they are now mandated to look at the sides of their parkways and expressways as a potential for restoration. So we hope we can set a model there. And then in an elementary school in Pelham, New York, they've asked for microforests to help bring more green space to their school. So all that said, the sky is the limit. I've heard the numbers anywhere between 40 and 120 million acres of open space in America. I don't know which number is right, so I just use the spectrum. But I did see a paper that open space residence is 1/3 of the lower 48 states. And I only say that to put it into context, how much space there is for us to still rewild, if we want to use that word, and make our communities and our individual lives healthier. So I've got one more slide, sir. All right, bring the focus down. So I was speaking in broad terms, although I wanted to sort of give you some context for why we exist. Planet Wild approach, microforests, started because Dave here, and he's going to talk about it in more depth, and Alan were thinking about microforests, which had been, it is more common and popular in Asia and Europe. We started reading about it here as it started to take hold in the northwest of America, Seattle, that area. Our partner at Aspetuck was talking about it. So that's what brought us towards the microforests scientifically. And then we just started to realize that these types of forests are there's no perfect, are very good to restore open, discarded, turf-heavy spaces in this metropolitan area. They're going to get into why it's so beneficial. So we came up with our general designs or thinking for this microforest. We have a science advisory board, and we have a feedback loop with them, and we were bringing sort of the ideas and the designs to them. They're old-fashioned forest ecologists. So they're nervous that there's going to be too much die-off over time, which you'll see. So with their feedback, we sort of modified the designs to fit what we think is going to work here. And then I'm going to come back to later in the presentation this wilder ecosystem, rewilding verification system that we've come up with. But I'll save that for later and turn it over to Alan.
Yeah. So why are microforests so popular? Why are we becoming popular? Why are we talking about it? Why is it on our minds? You know, in our industry, we're looking for the answer to the climate solution or whatever. And that is, you know, we want it now. We want it fast. And trees take a long time to grow, but these microforests theory, they grow 10 times faster than they permit trees to grow 10 times faster because of the ecosystems we're creating. We're planting so quickly. They take 20 to 30 years to mature instead of 200 to 300 years to mature. They approach maturity in 20 to 30 years because of we're planting an entire ecosystem. They start sequestering carbon much faster than if you just go out and plant a single tree. That takes a long time to grow. It's eating for its nutrients and its way in the world, and it doesn't have the relationship it does if it were growing in a forest. So we're really excited to be growing micro forests. They approach maturity so much faster. They become 30 times more dense than a monoculture forest. Therefore, they get to add all these benefits to the environment so much quicker. It's a significant benefit to having these microforests planted. We're coming up with all sorts of ways. He was mentioning like the old school ecologists are saying that's too much plant material in one space. And we're trying to come up with solutions for cost benefits as far as replacing the soil where we're planting them. And we're thinking a lot of this biomass, too much of it, the dieback and everything is rebuilding the soil system and creating biodiverse soils, which in turn create a more biodiverse ecosystem forest that we're planting, which is all really, it's super fascinating. It's really difficult to conceptualize how fast a forest that we plant, knee high, is going to become as green as the background, the screen. It's fascinating to see. Well, looking forward to going out and seeing how yours is growing. You only just planted it, so. And it brings the whole community together. A lot of people want to do this, want to be involved in the regreening, the rewilding of their spaces. So it's a whole community event, and it takes place throughout the generations. It's really fascinating. This is why we're doing microforests.
Let me just add one thing there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Miyawaki, who I don't know how much, Dave, you're going to talk about him specifically, but he's a Japanese landscape architect who came up with this methodology. Botanist. And he was a botanist. And he specified in his knowledge when he sort of felt confident in it, these plantings would not work unless they were done in tandem with the community, which is also a change in paradigm. Even in my life in New York City, we used to not ask the community, we just come in and do what we wanted. And that is, he the time of key who was worth survival was the community involvement.
It's a huge impact both in the environment and in the biodiversity of all the plants and animals, but also a huge impact in the whole community, the people involved. We all agree that Miyawaki's methodology with the whole community involvement is a large part of the success of these microforests.
Okay. So here is some stats of what we've done so far. This is a map of the Bridgeport area. We've done 7 schools, 7 sites for the Bridgeport Climate Smart List. We've also done some in New York. We've done some at Bram's house, some at my house, some at our other partner's house, just so we can be close to it, right? My kids help me plant it. That's where it starts. If your kids can plant a tree and they can see it grow, they'll always tell their kids and it'll pass on. So that having them close to home was good for us. We've planted about 4,300 native trees, shrubs, and ground covers, plugs mostly, on these 7 sites in about 3,700 square feet. Those are our stats. Each one was designed to be roughly 100 square feet, which is what you guys did out here apparently. And in that 100 square feet, we have about 150 50 plants total. I don't know how many you guys use, but that's kind of the ratio that we're at right now. And there's a lot of learnings from that. That's what we've done so far. So our design principles are based on these three things. The honest beauty. People don't realize out there that natives are actually beautiful. Use them in the right way, in the right forms, in the right function. They are beautiful, and they will be beautiful, and they're the reason that the animals are here. And if you design them, they end up looking very well for a long time. We also design for the human experience, right? We want people to engage with these. We want kids to plant them. We want, the community to be able to come see them in years 2, 5, 10, 20, right? Because that's how long these forests are going to last. So that's a big principle here, as well as being earth positive. Use the natives that are from here, that belong here, that create the biodiversity that also is attracted to those plants. So those are all the three things that we consider while designing all of these microforests. We're basically taking the Miyawaki method, we're jimmying it, making it a little bit different, and we're using it as our own style. So that's why we call them microforests, based on the Miyawaki method. The biggest site and the showcase site in Bridgeport was the Blackham School. It was about 600 square feet. It's their front entrance. There's a lot of, when you're doing this at scale and with a grant and with all sorts of community members and stakeholders, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. It's hard to really nail down who wants what, where, and how big. And so there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of involvement, there's a lot of talk about this. You have to be organized, you have to know what you're doing, and know what your outcome is. So that was one challenge with all our schools, because we were doing 7 different schools in 7 different locations all over Bridgeport.
And I point out,
Yeah,
I mean, look at how little green there is.
yeah.
This is a standard school in Bridgeport, and I don't, you can see it, I don't need to even explain it.
It's all just mowed lawn, terrible turf and parking lot. So again, the alignment from and input from all the key players, you got to take that into accountability. And then you have your budget and the maintenance are big considerations. And along those terms, in addition to just the plants and putting them in the ground, you have to worry about maintaining them over time and keeping them healthy over time, right? Fencing is a big issue. It's expensive. It's ugly. There's not a great way to do fencing. We recommend fencing just because a new tree, there's millions of things that can happen in a tree. Animals, bugs, destruction, people, kicking it, deer, browse, the maintenance, getting weed whacked, all those things. That's why we recommend fence, but it is more expensive. You got to kind of balance that. Same with the soil methods. Miyawaki's method is to remove the top 12 inches of soil and replace it completely. That's not very cost effective. So, and it's also, the native soil is kind of helpful for the native plants. And we want to do the least amount of disturbance as possible, as well as keeping these forests alive. So we kind of had to maintain that balance. Maintenance and irrigation is your other big costly items, especially when we're doing it in Bridgeport and we're located in Westchester. It's a lot of travel, a lot of coordination, a lot of things to think about. The other considerations are site assessments, right? Like you show up at the site, you gotta see power lines, you gotta take note of what's underground, right? Which not a lot of people understand that a giant in 50 years, that's 20 feet away. So you have to kind of educate and understand all these factors. Again, the community engagement, we want people to be able to see these forests. You don't want to fence it off because that keeps people away. You want it to be accessible, but fencing is necessary. So those are balances. And then it comes to the final one is the palette considerations of what types of trees and species to actually use. We're using 100% native. We want to use straight species. Not always that easy due to availability, which you guys probably know is very hard. Especially when when everybody's trying to plant in the spring and the fall. Not a lot of the plants we want are generally not there. Based on the recommendations from our advisory board, they recommended more shrub-heavy forests than trees. And that's because of the dense understory layer that creates the soil and also grows quicker. And we also designed these with Desiree, with Doug, with what we know from doing this over the last 5 years. We designed these to host specific species that are in decline because of habitat and because they're just, getting destroyed by humans. We want to keep that variety high, use a lot of varieties of species to attract the most amount of biodiversity. We also, ground cover is a very important part of the whole design and the functioning of the forest. Because the ground covers, if you plant plugs, they reduce weed suppression, they help reduce weeds over time, and they provide that habitat and soft landings for caterpillars, larvae, bugs, insects, for everything as they're living in that forest, which is what they need. So, as I said, we did about 150 plants in about 100 square feet. Our ratio tried to stick with. As you can see, it's shrub heavy by about 30% on trees. And for every 100 square feet, tried to do 2 canopy trees. That still might be a little too many, but we'll see. This is all a giant experiment also to see how these go, because these are brand new, never been done before. We've only seen the one at Daney Park in Cambridge. I don't know if you guys have heard about that one. Did Sugi do that, or was that all?
There's also partly Sugi.
It was partly Sugi.
Also at Cambridge Department of Forestry.
And they have one. You guys should check it out if you ever get a chance. There's a lot of pictures of it online. It's 2 years old, beautifully dense, and we were trying to mimic that, but also balance it with the aesthetics that the schools wanted, because they didn't want just a dense forest. They wanted it to also look beautiful.
It's hard to conceptualize what 100 square feet is going to look like with what, 10 canopy trees. They get this big in diameter. I mean, we decided to go with less canopy trees than the Milwaukee method proposes.
Yeah, and we did in Blackham, that site, you'll see pictures of it. We had 900 total plants in there. Here's our palette. These are internal documents. We try to, keep the interest fully seasonal. Like all 4 seasons have something going on, right? Either a flower in the spring, fruit in the fall, flower in the summer, and then also what happens in the winter with these. They don't get cut back. We try to mix in evergreens, so there's some green in there all year round.
Witch hazel, they flower in the winter.
Exactly. So those are all considerations in our designs as well. Here's some other of the plants that we used. The ground cover were typically Carex, violets, ginger, and whitewood aster. Through what I've learned, I would also like to use a more aggressive ground cover because the weeds are a problem, and especially in the late summer. But you kind of got to balance that ground cover with, being able to access the forest. You don't want it to be super dense, so it's kind of to find that right balance. It's tough, and we're still learning this. Here was the design for Blackham. It's the outer ring here is the 40-foot diameter of a canopy at maturity, which is hard to visualize, so we had to throw that on there to let people know how big these forests are going to be. Each side is about 300 square feet, and there are about 500 plants on each side. And the path along the middle to access through the front entrance to the school. This whole site is not fenced off, so anybody can just meander through this forest after we're done building it, which is why we recommended 100 feet of fence to go around it. Ultimately did not get built. Nobody wanted it there. We are about a year into this one, and so far there has been no vandalism. There's been no deer browse. The only thing that we've noticed is some chipmunks or squirrels or groundhogs nibbling on the bottoms of the trees. Other than that, it's perfectly intact, which I was surprised to see and very happy to see, because it's definitely better without the fence. And we call yeah, it's visually more appealing. And we called it the Embrace because if you can see, it kind of is hugging the school's front entrance. That was our design concept. Question?
Just the deer brow,
Yeah.
because of the color you selected, was it a mixture of like deer resistant, deer friendly, so that,
Nothing's deer resistant.
okay,
We try to say we use things that are less palatable to deer, and we did that, but it's also along a main road. So it's not like
so it's not like a good test of.
it's not a good test for the deer browse here at this site for sure, but we've done many other ones. That I've seen, especially in my house. I have a deer problem, and the deer tend not to eat the plants that we're planting. So as far as I can tell, it's okay. My selection so far.
It is, just to reinforce, these schools are pretty much in the center of the city of
You're
Bridgeport.
not getting them.
No.
We're more worried about lawnmowers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Or maintenance crews
Yeah.
mistaken
no,
for weeds, what is a native planting, and then they're gone.
But if the maintenance crews are there, while we're there, we can have that interaction with them, and they're all really psyched to have less lawn to mow and just excited to see new installations, so.
And the path in the middle is very important. We do understand that the path will disappear over time. I want it to disappear over time. That means the forest is growing well and it's dense and things are working well. But as forests grow, new paths emerge, things thin out, open up. We're going to see how that happens. But for the first couple of years, the kids who helped us plant these can walk through the forest and say, I planted that tree right there. They can go into the middle section and you can actually huddle around, and hopefully the teachers can, teach about what's happening there. You can literally see the butterflies and hopefully there's a frog in there someday. I'd be like, where'd that frog come from? Right? Like it's in the middle of the lawn. So that's the idea with the education part of being in all these schools, which is also very cool.
And I mean, the other outcome is that school would set sides to keep the path. Therefore, they're pruning it because it's important to the teachers or it's important to the students. It's important to the administrators. We don't know that outcome. Quite frankly, I hope that it stays open and they do cut it back because it is a nice place to be into. If you could see the full blackened campus from the sun in this case, I mean, I guess from anything, but we're thinking about the sun. And this is a place for kids they're young kids, it's elementary school, to be together with their teacher and be covered by the canopy.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that Danny Park Forest, Microforest did not have. They didn't allow any access at all. So all you can do is see it from the outside, and it's like 30 feet wide. You can't really see what's going on in there. This allows for us, for everybody, because we're going to be studying these over the long term, for us to be able to access it and see what's going on. The other thing we had to do is sketch sections and renderings, projecting what this is going to look like in 2 to 5 to 10 years. This is our best rendering of 2 years, right? We're about a year in. It's about half this size right now, which is cool to see. So I think our rendering is actually spot on.
If we don't say so ourselves.
Here it is from the planting day from above. This was a drone picture from Aspetuck. It's pretty cool. Now here you can see that's an actual embrace. It's a hug. It all worked out in terms of building it as designed, which doesn't happen a lot. People put things, our architects and designers put it on paper. It doesn't always look that way when you turn out in the real life, but this one actually did. There was no obstructions, no problems, and it went to plan pretty well. So very happy with it. Here's us at planting day. This is structured chaos. As you guys will know, anybody who's planning with volunteers and kids and all different situations. This was our biggest event. So all of a sudden we thought we were ready, and then they let the school out, and then kind of all hell broke loose. We only had 4 shovels for like 65 kids. And everybody's asking me what to do, and we didn't pre-dig any of the holes, we didn't do any of that, we just had them all laid out. Things got screwed up, they went in the wrong spots.
We were taking lots of notes.
It was mayhem, kids were running through it, it was all happiness, though, right? Like everybody, the smile on everybody's faces, even my team and me personally, knowing that it was getting screwed up in real time, and we'd have to fix it later, but it was happy, kids loved it. Fran was out there teaching the kids about, don't break your back, you gotta bend like this, use your legs, all that good stuff. Because they've never really planted these things before. They never planted a tree. They never felt the dirt in their hands. And it was really cool to see. It was definitely the highlight of my career. I built a lot of playgrounds in Central Park. And I built a lot of things in Central Park. There's nothing as rewarding as this with kids planting in the ground a tree. It was unbelievable.
How old are the trees and shrubs?
They're like saplings. A lot of them are probably 1 to 2 years old. We did a lot of whips. We did a lot of 1 to 2 gallons. So not very old at all.
What are whips? Is that bare root?
Whips is bare root, yeah. We got all our stuff from Long Island natives, as in one delivery. How do I play this
One
video?
more thing,
Huh?
one more thing.
One more clip? Cool. This is a video that we made, oops. There. One more click and then I should play. I did that last time. I guess this will play. But yeah, it was a exciting event. Sorry. Even who was that? The Bridgeport, the supervisor of all the schools, superintendent of all the schools came out. Everybody was really excited to see her there. She had a blast. Hopefully they build more of these. The site prep, you guys might all be wondering how that works in such a large scale. We did a variety of different methods in terms of sod removal. We cut it, we rototill it, we plant into it. The best practices I would say is the sod cutting. It takes away that layer of sod that has a lot of the seed bank embedded in it. And the problem with that though is what do you do with the sod? It's expensive to remove it. It's expensive to throw it out. It's kind of not sustainable because not a lot of places like to take sod because it has potential of having chemicals sprayed in it. So not a lot of people will just say, yeah, throw your sod over here. So you got to find specific places to get rid of it, which is usually a lot of just don't.
You couldn't just make a pile of it to compost and.
On a private residence, I would say yes, 100%. Not in a school. It's in an institution like this. It's not really. There's not a spot for that. So we had to haul it away. But I would definitely say sod cutting is the best. And then we would best practice. We sod cut it, and then we rototill organic matter, leaf compost, just regular compost into that top 1 foot of soil. So we didn't remove any soils, we just added a little bit of amendment and enhanced it a little bit. We're trying to do it to be cost prohibitive, but also because we want to see what happens with the least amount of work and make this affordable for anybody to do in the future. The kids, the other cool part about the, prep was that they were interested in the design. They were interested in the why. Like, why are you doing this? What is happening? I had them laying out the flags of the actual site with me, and they were looking at the plans, and they were very engaged at this level. And those are fourth graders, fifth graders. So they gotta learn and see, and bring them into the mix in that early stages of the game, as well as the planting too. They love the planting. And then this is sweet pea. I try to use sweet pea, green pea. It's a product. Everybody's got its different name. That is what we've found provides the best mulch layer for weed suppression, and the sweet pea has a little bit of organics and food for the trees, plants, and shrubs. This was Tisdale. This one was a large site, one of the bigger ones. We rototilled that. And Tisdale right now has the most weed problems. So rototilling soil gives you a lot of weed problems later on. But we'll have to take care of that. So this one was all rototilling and adding soil 8-10 yards. We did about a yard per 100 square feet of compost. First thing of scale, a large space, is that I would recommend having a drawing. It needs to be a drawing, well thought out. It needs to be designed. It needs to be, you need to show up on site and know what you're going to do. You got to have people help you because it's so dense. Once you get there and you don't really have a reference point, you can see Jackie here studying that plan for about 2 hours to figure out what is going where, because it was very dense. That is a necessity. This one also has a pathway design through it, which is great. And here's our drawing, right? You can see how this one was a Dunbar. It was just a circle, so we didn't really have any reference points to pull from. And you got this plan with a bunch of circles and a bunch of lines and a bunch of colors on it. We did the shrub layer. We kind of put in, this one shows the shrub layer in the foreground. And then all these large circles, the shrub layer goes in the background and the trees come in the foreground. So you can stare at it and look at it on site. If you don't read plans a lot, it's hard to know what you're looking at as you're on site. So I'd say that is 100% necessary. Because of the density. And then none of these sites, another thing to hit on is the irrigation. Yes, you have a question?
Do you guys make your diagrams? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all done by designers in AutoCAD.
In what?
AutoCAD.
Oh.
And then the last thing is the irrigation. None of these sites have irrigation. Irrigation is always a costly add-on. It was what worried me as planning these forests, because I just see the logistics of me driving over there and my team and trying to water all these sites throughout the next 2 years, which is our maintenance contract through them. But last year was very wet. This year has been pretty wet so far. I'm worried about August this year a little bit, but as of now, to date, even with the Con Ed sites, Con Ed we haven't gone and watered once because it's been okay with the rain. These sites in Bridgeport, we've watered 2 or 3 times now at this point. And the other cool thing about all this has worried me the most. We've lost maybe 3 plants out of all these plants. 5,000 plants. I mean, I'll say 3 trees and shrubs. We probably lost a bunch of the plugs. The plugs get picked up by animals. Picked trees and the shrubs. We probably only lost 3 of them out of probably 3,500.
You use pre-tubes or anything?
Nope.
Or nothing?
Nope. Some of these sites have fence. The one at Blackland, which I showed you guys, does not have fence, and it has been fine. We haven't lost a single plant at Blackland.
Do you have any strategy for how far apart place them or in how far?
Yeah, there's a mathematical equation and algorithms that I can't tell you how they work. But we do set them up in a grid style fashion, and we basically know how many square feet each 2 gal, 3 gal, and plug takes up. We kind of divide it up, and my designers kind of figure it all out, and then that gives us the quantity of plants at the end of the day. Yeah.
Do your designers also have like environmental knowledge as well as like architectural, structural knowledge? Like what is their?
Along with my input, because I'm the one who's been installing these over the last 2 years, yes, they have an aesthetic knowledge that you need to figure out what goes where, but we're also dealing with another animal here of forests, right? That not a lot of people have ever designed. If you're like, I don't know really many designers who designed a forest. So it's a lot of learning, and what we're most excited about is seeing what it looks like in 3 years from the ones that we built a year ago. And then we'll be able to modify, add, delete as necessary to create the next generation of microforests with our learnings, with our biodiversity study, and figuring out how to make them better. So we're above the game on that, I think. Here's some of the installation photos. We like to use electric augers. Augers are a necessity, especially when you're planting at this scale. It just goes quicker. Like there's a lot of disturbance. No matter what you do, I always try to say the less disturbance is better. No matter what you do with a forest this dense, you're going to disturb all the weed seeds, all the seed bank that's already there. So there's really, it's just how to mitigate that in the best way possible. This is the site over at Con Ed. The maintenance and the monitoring. Bram will touch on the monitoring, but you get all your typical weeds, your chickweed, your crabgrass, your nutsedge, smartweed, mugworts, wood sorrel, garlic mustard, all of it comes back. As long as you do timely maintenance visits to get rid of that so it doesn't crowd out the actual small trees, you're fine. They can grow for a little bit, then you take that material away. We're trying to utilize that material in that forest floor as organic matter to build that soil biodiversity and fungal system. Yes.
What frequency of maintenance visits do you?
It's timely, right? So you got to do one in the spring. You do one in the late summer, depending. Each site is different. Each site is either full. So the full sun sites, you got to go there maybe a couple of times in the summer. I tell people 4 to 6 times per year per site, just to keep it going and keep it alive. But we're still working that out. Watering once a month. July and August, you're probably going 2 to 3 times a month, even once a week, if there's no irrigation. And then the last part of this is training the community for the ongoing maintenance, right? That is the best way to keep these forests going strong for years, because I'm not back to these 5, 6 years from now. They're staying alive. The community kind of needs to be trained. It's a little bit of a specialty training. Plugs versus the weeds. Not everybody knows natives versus the weeds, so it's a hard thing to figure that out. But what we're trying to build in our maintenance regimes is a moment so they can weeds versus the natives, and we can tell them and show them what to do and how to move forward. And I think that ends. This was also one other rendering we did. See, anybody know the purple?
Red bud.
Very good. Cedars in there. We got a low level of ground covers, grasses, and carexes in there. Generally, that's what we're thinking we're going to see in 3 years from now. We'll see. Yeah.
So when you're in the sites, I'm assuming, do you guys have a particular quantity of water that you're accounting for each?
Not necessarily calculated down to that level. We're using, what is happening now in terms of the watering for all of these 7 sites is we're hooking up to their hoses. We're dragging hoses out, and we're watering as necessary, right? Just to give a good watering.
Yeah. So you're not having to bring water to the site.
We're not bringing water to the site yet. It might have to happen, and
We're gonna do that.
You guys are gonna do that with big jugs.
Do big rain barrels,
Mhm.
built up, we've done it in some parks, built up on high wooden stands.
Yeah.
The city will fill a bunch of rain barrels for us,
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's a great
because
solution.
there's no water.
Love that solution. And then Fran will take over the science.
I was remiss in, leaving one piece out of my bio that's relevant for everybody. I'm on the board of Hilltop Hanover Farm. So in my capacity at the farm, I'm mainly focused on the native plant operation and was behind the development of Local 59. Have people heard of that network? A new network that was developed about 2 years ago through Hilltop, but now it's about the network itself, and that is to increase the supply of ecotypical plants. So we are, Planet Wild is a design, build, and monitoring company. That's what we are in very fundamental terms. The monitoring is what makes us distinct. Many landscape architect firms are just design. It's unique if they have a build also. There are more design builds, but our monitoring angle gives us a uniqueness in what we offer, but is also filling a gap that we saw was missing in this wave of metropolitan conservation. So in New York City, science meant investment. For the Green Infrastructure Program, our early experimentation with using gardens in the public right-of-way ultimately led to the $6 billion Green Infrastructure Program in New York City. There was an EPA consent decree on the city, so they did have to do something, but there was a lot more green in the plan because of what we've done. The Million Trees Program was directly funded with the tune of $400 million because when we were asked our vision of a sustainable New York City by Mayor Bloomberg, we were able to show the data that was then coming out from the Forest Service. So science equals investment. And this is what the Wilder ecosystem, our formal name for our rewilding verification system, is. For a while, we dabbled in the carbon market, thinking the carbon market would be the way to bring an economic value to ecosystem services. It's just too complicated. It didn't work for the scale, the regional scale that we want to work on anyway. And we realized what we really needed was a rewilding verification system. Because if you have the science that justifies the investment and justifies that the investment is still growing over time, not in 100% of the cases, but many cases, cities, private individuals, institutions are much more willing to invest. Many institutions, whether they're public or private, already have sustainability mandates, biodiversity mandates. So they're looking for ways to reach those mandates, and the science help them become more comfortable with the investment. So what we are designing in the Wilder ecosystem tool, which we're doing with this group of people down on the bottom, is we are developing this rewilding verification system through desktop analysis, geospatial analysis, existing literature, which is limited. When you start rabbit holing into the literature on suburban ecology, it's not nearly as robust as what you might find, of course, about the Adirondacks, or what you would find in New York City, in which there's now been 20 years of data collection. But we're also collecting original days across private residences, schools, corporate campuses, and preserves in Westchester and Fairfield County. The microforests are included in all this data collection. Next slide. And the way we are developing it, and I didn't say this clearly enough at the beginning, our lead scientist is not me. It's Desiree Narango from the Vermont Center for Eco Studies, who studied with Doug Tallamy, who is on our science advisory board, with forest ecologists from CUNY, from the soil ecologists from CUNY, from somebody from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and somebody from the Yale School of the Environment. But Des and I are primarily developing a system, and there are 4 streams of data in this monitoring system. Ecosystem services, which comes from measuring the woody material on any given property, feeding it into iTree and getting back numbers on carbon, water, pollution mitigation, and we're using actually a different set of papers to come up with a number for heat. Habitat diversity, that is the proportion of native flowering plants within that landscape. Wildlife, that is just getting a sense of the activity and the quantity and ultimately quality, like quality I mean rare, endangered, uncommon species of pollinators, primarily birds and insects in a particular land. And then yard management, which is a survey of all these 28 owners that participated in year one. They got a survey about their land management practices. You score better, of course, if you're pretty sustainable. You score less well if you're using a lot of pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers and you're mowing every other week. So each category has its own score. It's combined weighted for a total score. I think is there one more slide? Yeah. And this is what it looks like. Keep in mind, we've been doing this for a year now, so we are very much still in beta stage. This is going to get more sophisticated over time, but this is a real life example, not a real life house. I mean, it is a real life house, but not one of our clients. But the score does come from a client. And that is 191, and as you might guess, as part of the Wilder Ecosystems tool, you don't just get your score, you get a series of recommendations to increase your score, which is just a gamified way of increase your ecological health. So something like 191 would be more woody material, more native plant will attract more pollinators, potentially this is for long-term sustainability. This particular place, 8.62, not much else you could do. You can probably put in some more woody material. You can probably, obviously find more way. In this, sorry, let me take that back. Just remember the recommendation for this one. For this one, the recommendation was just a suite of plants that we knew attracted uncommon, threatened, and endangered species within the region. Doesn't always work, but this was what we really focused on with a score like this. The score is 1 to 10. So our hope is that through this system, which we hope will be adopted widely, because it's a methodology we want to establish that can be used anywhere. Of course, you're going to have local people identifying the plants and habitats. How we share that intellectual property, we do not know yet, but we want to see it push the movement and then push investment. And the investment can be in many ways. It can be tax credits, making rewilding in Connecticut and New York. Those are places we work now, but anywhere, a similar tax credit like an agricultural credit or a timber credit. But also this unlocks government funding, foundation funding, and even individual funding. You're a person that wants to do the right thing. You're used to paying $150 every other week for mow and blow, and we come to you and say, your 6 acres is going to cost $30,000, which is what it might very well cost. And you have the money, but you're on the fence about it. Seeing the science, it does make it easier. Feel like you're making this investment over time. And then if we can link it to economic values, which is where we'd like to head, then it makes it even easier to make that decision, because if you can then trade biodiversity credits, you can earn money for your family and for your home over time. So that's what we are working on, the Wilder ecosystem. I think we're at it.
And these are the sites as of 6/27. That one is Dunbar. That was the circle that I showed you. That's what it looks like a couple of weeks ago. That one is, you can see the difference between fenced and unfenced, right? That's Clater. I hate the fence, but we needed it. And that one's in Blackham. That's the path. That's the embrace. That's, that birch right there, gray birch, is about 6 feet tall. So it's only a year old. So there we go. Questions, comments,
But
concerns?
this is a picture of the part of the microforest in Cambridge. And it's a complete circle, just packed to the brim.
Thanks for coming. Questions? Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of other microforest type places use a lot of wood chips. You're having, what's your methodology for like, what was your thought process or how you want it to do?
If there's wood chips close, or if there's that type of reusing of existing material, I would say do it.
So there wasn't a active decision not to use it, it was more of a functional.
It was more of like, that's just readily available on the market, easy to transport kind of thing, and works a little bit better to suppress weeds than just wood chips do. I know wood chips are cheaper, but we built that price into the microforest, so that's why we use them.
When they're available, we will.
Yeah.
Wood chips are definitely, they build
Those
very good soil.
Yeah.
Unless there are, weed seeds in the bank, which in New York City, which is why we didn't do it. Because it would just take over quickly. More questions? Yes.
Yeah, any place I bought tree whips from has recommended tree tubes. So I'm wondering your reasoning behind not using them, and if it has to do with the location being more suburban or.
It's just an aesthetic, really. And if it's out in the woods, I would definitely say recommend tree tubes, because I've seen them, they work, right? After 2 years, the growth is not eaten by deer, right? I think that's the purpose of the tree tubes, is to, if you're out in the woods with no deer protection, kind of helps with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there, I was asked this by a DEP funder, a forester. Is there any peer-reviewed science or any, have there been studies of why the Miyawaki method works in terms of plants growing faster, absorbing carbon faster? Is there,
No,
I mean, they're supporting this. Obviously, they're not money for it, but they're looking for science. And so I didn't know what.
the answer is no. There's a big gap in the science, which was very surprising to us. Because when we were first looking into it, and we even spoke, there is a nonprofit called SUGI, S-U-G-I, and they've been the main nonprofit driver of microforests internationally. And we've gone to their website and talked to their lead designer, and they've admitted that they have not done any monitoring in association with their design and planting work. I'm not sure why. It might be a West Coast, East Coast thing. That's a joke. I say it up front, although I kind of mean it a little bit. But some of it might be the West Coast, East Coast thing. And in this case, I mean, my background being through city government, like we could not get through anything without showing some kind of metric.
Yeah.
Whereas this was funded through SUGI, which is a nonprofit. I don't know how they raise their money. So, but we hope to fill that gap, not only ourselves, but the more we're doing microforests. Obviously, Rye has now done a microforest. We're going to be doing one soon in Norwalk. As those sites grow, inevitably the data is going to grow. It's going to feed in through us. It's going to attract forest ecologists. It's going to attract new scientists coming out of college looking to make their own name. So it'll change over time, but right now it's a big presupposition.
It seems like a good thing, a good project for like a Yale School of Environment person looking for some stuff.
We now have somebody from Yale on our advisory board,
Okay.
and the idea is to maybe not yet, but soon offer it up to, so it's CUNY, Cornell, Yale, and University of Delaware. So and then, as I said earlier, we've been working with WC, Westchester Community College and SUNY Purchase. To me, they are all ripe for taking this on to study, whether it's through a student or through the division, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
Yes.
The little wildlife system scoring, is there like way you measure that? Is that like
Can
available?
you say that again? Sorry.
The way you measure the data, the like score data?
Yeah.
Data, is that like available? Like what?
No, it's not. I mean, I can tell you what it is and you can easily reproduce it.
Okay.
It's those 4 strains of data, right? Collecting data on woody material, feeding it through iTree, collecting data. There's many different ways to collect data. We are taking our cues from Desiree Narango at Vermont Center for Eco Studies, collecting data about habitat, which is really just identifying the native plants on site. Wildlife, we're getting our wildlife data through two ways. If it's me, because I'm not so good at it, it's just taking pictures and sending them to Daz and her team. And if it's Daz and her team, they're both IDing it on site, but they're also capturing specimens and taking it up to the lab. So that's how we've combined the scores is, our big, private mystery. It's not, I mean, the way we're combining scores, we're just trying to weight it by size of site. So a 1 acre site is comparable to another 1 acre site. You're not rating that 1 acre site versus a site that has 20 acres. So that factors into how we're weighting everything. So we're putting the pieces together in the way that makes most sense to us. So in that way, it's unique. People haven't done it before, but we're not inventing any new ways to do it per se, except, in bioacoustic technology at the 28 sites that were original sites, we're putting in bioacoustic technology, which picks up bird sounds. It's very rudimentary technology, so it's only bird sounds. We'd like to have technology that picks up insect sounds. Now, at the end of the summer, we'll collect them all. Some people at Vermont Center for the Eco Studies will go through it and identify all the birds. And we're trying to get a sense, can these remote tools give us valuable data that helps us understand the site, or do we still need to send more people out more often to collect the data? We don't know the answer. But for this to really, remember, we're a for-profit company, so we want to sell this stuff. For it really to take off, it's going to have to be as easy as possible to collect data. Yes.
I have two kind of rapid fire questions for you. One is with this school, did you get into perspective as far as safety goes in planting, being that they're worried about the kids or the cameras are blocked or anything like that?
Yeah, 100%. That's the one thing they're worried about is kids hiding in the forests, not being able, the kids go out and the teachers can't see the kids. That was number one. But ultimately it didn't dissuade them from doing it. So they all got built. Maybe in 10 years they might have that problem. But who knows? We'll see.
Poisonous plants.
Yeah.
The second question was, you rewilding a lot, and I've researched this a little bit, but trying to figure out what the difference is between rewilding and restoration.
Yeah.
What that definition is for you all.
Scale. For me, it's just scale. There's no other difference. Restoration, forest restoration traditionally brings up a larger scale. And maybe it's changing in the way it's taught in school now, but surely for my generation, whereas rewilding just is a smaller scale. I'm sure there are much more comprehensive distinctions and definitions, but that's how I see it.
We have a couple online questions.
Okay.
One question was, what may be the long-term difference between planting a microforest as opposed to fencing in a lawn or meadow and allowing local native woody plants to grow from seed, assuming both are managed for invasive species?
So I can only tell you what the data says so far, which is not so comprehensive, but there is a data set on NOMO. And what's become obvious from the NOMO, if you completely leave it alone and you don't take into account removing invasives, it tends to balance out as a 60-40, natives, non-natives. It can go either way. And in many cases, that's okay. They're novel ecosystems. In other cases, if you're managing for invasives, you can clearly get a meadow or successional forest over time. It's going to take longer, and you're going to be dependent upon what are traditional succession species here. And you'll see over time how the configuration of the forest was, we're designing it. And so we're
We're
designing,
designing it with diversity, right? Like, you're not gonna get the diversity that you get in a just natural occurring meadow versus what we put in with the 25, 30 different species. You just get better diversity.
And I mean, it was designed for industrial areas. I mean, the place we're doing one, there are no trees.
that's right.
It is a best what was paved, and we got paved. So there's not gonna be any, there's no
Yeah.
way to.
Yeah, the whole faster idea
Yes,
works out in planting a microforest as opposed to fencing off and seeing what happens. It's a great idea too, but the whole faster mechanism
And
doesn't
it-
take place.
and right, and that's essential to that question. Over 50 years, the managed no-mow place and our microforest might look the same, but they're not gonna look the same over the next 10 to 15 years. And you just get more environmental services, as Alan was saying, more quickly, which is what you want in a lot of these neighborhoods. But in your case, the Norwalk case, you're right. That is taking concrete and turning it into green in a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of green. That's a different situation.
Love that.
Another question is, some of us are here from Baltimore City. Do you have any loose approximations of cost?
Loose approximations of cost, yeah. Yeah, between $8,000 to $10,000 per 100 square feet.
Which will change over time.
Yeah.
As more and more people want microforests, which is what we hope. Those unit costs will go down, but it's expensive now.
It's a lot of work. There's a lot of procurement, there's a lot of design work. Obviously, the logistics, there's the training and the maintenance over time. It's a lot to think about if you're gonna do it in the right way, so.
What are, you mentioned you made modifications using some of the more traditional methods. Outside of, I think I saw some differences in how you prep the soil. Are there other major modifications helpful?
In terms of,
I know you said you did remove like the top whatever inches of soil and replace it. with
Yeah.
Either food or something.
yeah, that's the modification from the Miyawaki
Yeah, yeah.
method, also with the different species, right? He
Yeah.
used
Right.
things native to his country, where we're using our native species, which is not a lot of research there, so it's
But
us.
you held up pretty similarly to like some of the densities.
We tried to do the densities, but based on our advisory board, we did go shrub heavy, which is, I think, different ratios than his method from his books too. But yeah, it was structurally
Similarly
similar.
dense, similarly dense.
Yeah,
There's different ratios of.
Goal maybe not for a forest.
exactly.
How are you prepared to deal with more outside factors? Like, I know that the deer browsing is an ongoing issue, and as you may expand more and maybe become a much larger problem. But black bear are also starting to increase their population, and they become very accustomed to noise very quickly.
Mhm.
So if they're to say hide in your areas or just any potential area that might be
Increasing biodiversity.
yeah. But they can hide about just and I mean, airports, there's been some reports of persons in the neighborhood. So as their populations increase, how are you guys prepared to deal with the outside factors of like different animals?
I think we welcome it. I think the humans are the problem. We'd rather see more bears, but
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That's more bears could
Maybe
possibly
like a whip can,
scare people.
so you could watch.
We haven't thought about it directly.
The wolves are coming back now too, starting to populate.
I think our answer is Dave's answer. We would prefer to have the biodiversity. However, if there are safety issues, it's not going to be in our hands, right? It's going to be in the local municipality or the school's hands. And
Common side effects. Bears.
Hopefully bears eat the deer. Then there you go. Solve everybody's problem.
Quick follow-up question to the cost. They're asking, is that out-of-pocket expense? Is that also include labor?
That includes everything: labor, materials, design, logistics, everything. Gas.
You'd like a broad breakdown of like, here's how much I spent on plants.
Yeah, so roughly $20,000 to $30,000 in terms of plant material alone for all all the ones in Connecticut, roughly, I would say.
I mean,
Don't quote me on that. All the 7 schools, yeah, that was the plant material cost. Which was that 2,500 square feet. So 150, whatever that ratio is, you're looking at plant material costs of, yeah. I think I've done the calculation of per plant cost, and it gets down, when you look at it as per plant cost, it was like something like $15 to $30 per plant for each microfibers. So I have those breakdowns if everybody ever wanted to talk more. Yeah.
Would you recommend this bid for like flood mitigation or like that kind of work?
That's a great question. Yes, it would take a different level of design, and thought behind that, but 100%. The water capture on a tree versus a shrub, you'd probably be more tree heavy, and the species are completely different, but also, you know, harder to find. So sourcing and doing that type of restoration is a different animal, but 100% I would recommend that type of thing for sure.
But to point one thing out, you're capturing stormwater from a metropolitan area. There's a lot of crap in the water. And you do have to be careful. When the city Department of Environmental Protection came to us, the Parks Department, and said, we just want to use your forest to capture stormwater. And we knew that that dirty water is too heavy and was going to start killing our forests over time. So when it comes to green infrastructure, which is the terminology we use in this part of America to reference stormwater management through natural systems, one really has to look into the plant species and their capacity to manage the nitrogens and the carbons, the potassiums in the runoff. So just make sure that that's what you're thinking about, you do need to look into the hydrology and to the level of toxicity.
Go outside? Yeah,
Let's see your microphones.
So for everybody who's on Zoom, I will send this presentation back out. Feel free to contact if you have any more questions. But thank you for joining us.
Yes. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.
All right, for everybody else, what we're going to do is I'm going to walk us. It's like a 5-minute walk to the spot that we planted. And then we will do about a 4-minute drive to the Con Ed campus to see the more urban spaces. Before we do that, right outside the store, there's bathrooms. If anybody needs them, you can also fill up your water.